oppression and plunder, I'm going right back to where I started from in the beginning. Law has a very limited purpose. And when we take the law and use it for more than it was intended, and the government starts acting outside the scope of any legitimacy, then it is an abuse of power, and it is a usurpation of the people's sovereignty. And when a long train of these events is designed to reduce the people under absolute despotism, this is when the founding fathers, all 55 of them that signed the Declaration of Independence, said, you know, it's time to throw it off. The question is not if or when, but how. And that's the conversation we need to have, how. And I prefer not bloodshed, I prefer conversation. But you know, if they're going to take us down a trail of having to defend ourselves with our arms, now is the time for us to have that conversation with the sheriff. And now is the time that we do not back off from our sheriff in that conversation. Under the pretense of organization, regulation, protection, or encouragement, the law takes property from one and gives to another. It takes wealth from all and gives to a few. When the law is being used as a weapon against the American people for the establishment of socialism, which leads to communism, that's the essence of statism. When people are treated as subjects of the ruler, when people are structured into social and economic classes, people have only such rights as rulers dictate. When land is treated as the realm of the ruler, i.e. zoning and national and state parks, that's statism. Now, Benito Mussolini, fascist dictator, said that there is a great, silent, continuous struggle between the state and the individual, between the state which demands and the individual which attempts to evade such demands. Because the individual, left to himself, unless he be a saint or hero, always refuses to pay taxes, obey laws, or go to war. Again, force. According to fascism, a true great spiritual life cannot take place unless the state has risen to a position of preeminence in the world of man. The curtailment of liberty thus becomes justified at once, and this need of rising the state to its rightful position. Fascist ethics begin with the acknowledgement that it is not the individual who confers a meaning on society, but instead the existence of a human society which determines the individual character of the individual. In statism, problems are solved by passing more laws, issuing new edicts, creating more bureaus, appointing new administrators, and increasing taxes to pay for these services. Taxes and government regulations are always oppressive. Folks, we are living in a socialist, fascist, slippery road to full-blown totalitarian dictatorship. Any form of structure of government which regiments the citizen and reduces him to a status of the ward of government so that the citizen becomes a subject of his own government and ceases to be a free citizen. That's what we're up against. How do you identify legal plunder? Does the law take from some and give to others to whom it doesn't belong? Does the law benefit one citizen at the expense of another by doing what the citizen himself cannot do without committing a crime? Abolish this law immediately, for it is not only an evil in itself, but is a fertile source for further evils because it will spread, multiply, and develop into a system. This socialist system didn't begin when Obama took over. This socialist system began in about 1913 when the monetary powers were suddenly delegated to the Federal Reserve System. Or maybe we could say this fascist system began after the Civil War when Andrew Johnson was shot and the elephant's nose got under the tent because they didn't eliminate the, they didn't maintain the greenbacks, and so the banks came in and introduced their own money. The person who profits from this law will complain bitterly, defending his required rights. He will claim that the state is obligated to protect and encourage his particular industry because protected industry is thus able to spend more and pay higher wages to the poor working man. Doesn't that sound familiar? Mm-hmm. This is how they justify it. Do not listen to the sophistry of vested interests. The acceptance of these arguments will build legal plunder into the whole system. In fact, this has already occurred. He was writing this in 1848. This is old news. We just hadn't been taught this in our public schools. The present-day delusion is an attempt to enrich everyone at the expense of everyone else, to make plunder universal under the pretense of organizing it. Here's how we recognize what legal plunder is. Benefits, subsidies, progressive taxation, guaranteed profits, minimum wages, right to relief, guaranteed jobs, and public schools. Public schools is the engine to maintain the legal plunder, because the schools are teaching socialist dogma inside the schools. They're not teaching the Constitution. My hat's off to those people that want to run for school board and introduce the Constitution, but they're going to be opposed at every step, because that's not the purpose for these schools. These schools are indoctrination mills, and they're preparing us for totalitarian dictatorship, and we all know it. We're all afraid to talk about it. And it's that elephant in the room that is putting us into a system of slavery that we're not going to be able to resist unless we start resisting. The few plunder the many. The law has to follow one of these. The few plunder the many. Everybody plunders everybody, or nobody plunders anybody. The question of legal plunder must be settled once and for all. The real issue in this country is the law is being used as an instrument of plunder, and it is being now the engine, the mechanism that is going to defend and protect that system is rising right in our own backyard. So we're going to take a break, and we'll come back and talk about some means to resist nonviolently. Thank you for listening.